Welcome. My name is Wendy Rollletter-Sook, and I am here today to talk with you about financial assistance for continuing students. If you have any problems hearing me, please feel free to indicate that in the chat box. Also, if you have questions as we go through, please feel free to enter those into the chat box. I can take those if they relate to what we're talking about at the time, or I will also go through and make sure that we cover everything that you have questions about at the end. And I will allow plenty of time at the end to answer questions as you have them. So let's go ahead and get started. My name is Wendy Rollletter-Sook, and I'm an Assistant Director in the Financial Aid Office at Fort Hays State University. And what I'm going to talk to you tonight about is financial assistance, and specifically the topics that I'm going to cover here will be categories, types, and sources of financial aid, the FAFSA, or the Free Application for Federal Student Aid, and then some special circumstances that may apply to your situation that may not be accurately able to be answered on the FAFSA, but that we can address in our office on a case-by-case basis. So to start with, let's talk about the federal student aid programs. There are a number of different programs offered by the federal government, some in the form of grants and some in the form of loans and work study. The grant options for federal aid include the federal Pell Grant, which is the most common grant. And just one second here. I had something move off of my screen. I appreciate your patience. Just 1 minute. We're having a little technical difficulty here.
PowerPoint?
Oh. Yeah.
It's still there, so I'd keep talking if you can read it.
Okay.
They're seeing it.
Okay. In talking more about the grant options, the federal Pell Grant is the most common form of grant financial aid and is determined by students in the information that they provide on the FAFSA. It is a need-based grant, meaning that students need to have financial need in order to be eligible for the grant. And the amount varies depending on a student's need as well as their enrollment level, how many hours they may be taking in any particular semester. The additional type of grant is the TEACH grant, the Teacher Education Assistance for College and Higher Education grant. This is a grant designed for students who are planning to teach in specific subject matter areas and in specific geographic locations. This is a grant for students that is dependent upon meeting those requirements. So if a student decides not to teach in that particular geographic region or in that particular subject field, that grant turns into an unsubsidized loan. We encourage students to really make sure that they are planning to pursue that particular education program and teach in that area before agreeing to take out the TEACH grant, so that it does not become an unsubsidized loan where interest will start accruing from the time that the student actually received the funds. A third grant option is the Federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant. This is a grant designed for high-need students, and the amount varies, but typically is a relatively small grant of roughly $800. One of the loans available to students through the federal programs is the Federal Perkins Loan. This is also a need-based award. It's a need-based loan that has a 5% interest rate for students, and it is what we call a limited funded program, which means that we only have a certain amount of limited funds to award in Perkins loans, and when we do that on a first-come, first-served basis, so that students who submit their FAFSAs early have a better chance of being awarded those funds, assuming that they meet the need eligibility criteria. Federal Work Study is another need-based award that allows students to receive governmental funds for work that they do. This is a need-based program as well, and it requires that a student find a job on campus in order to acquire those work study funds. This is not an award that a student receives cash up front. They do have to acquire the job, meaning they have to go through the regular process of applying and being hired into the position. The advantage to work study is that for the department who is employing the student, they get some of the salary funds or wage funds from the federal government. So they don't have to pay for all of that through their own budget, meaning then it's helpful to them to hire a work study student where they may not have as much cost in order to pay that student. The advantage for the student is that those funds then don't have to be included on the FAFSA as income for the student. So it gives them a little bit of an advantage when calculating their estimated family contribution, that they don't have to include those work study funds. The most common loans for students on the federal side are subsidized and unsubsidized federal loans. And these loans could be awarded to almost any student. However, the subsidized loan is a loan where the interest is paid for by the government while the student is enrolled at least half-time. It is a need-based award, so the student does have to have need in order to be eligible for a subsidized loan. The unsubsidized loan will accrue interest while the student is enrolled at least half-time, and that starts accruing from the time that they basically receive the first funds from that award. The subsidized and unsubsidized loans do have limits for students. The annual limit for a student who is a freshman dependent student, total combined is $5,500 for the year. Of that $5,500, the maximum amount the student can receive in subsidized funds is $3,500, with the additional $2,000 being available to students in unsubsidized loan funds. That number, the annual loan limit, will increase on a year-to-year basis. So they will have a total of $6,500 in eligibility, or up to $6,500 in eligibility as a sophomore, and then up to $7,500 in eligibility for their junior and senior years. These loans do have fixed interest rates. Those rates change on an annual basis based on the market. And the last loan that you see there is a PLUS loan, and for dependent students, the most common PLUS loan is the Parent PLUS loan. This is an option for students or their parents to help pay for the student's educational costs. It does require an additional request form to be submitted by the parent, as well as a master promissory note. If they are approved, and it is a credit-based loan, they can secure funds for this to help the student with their educational expenses. If a parent is denied a PLUS loan, we do have the ability to award an additional unsubsidized loan to the student. It may not be in the same full amount as the PLUS loan could be, but we do have some ability to award some additional funds in unsubsidized loans if a parent is denied the PLUS loan. I mentioned earlier the free application for federal student aid, or the FAFSA. And the FAFSA, as many of you probably already know, because you've probably done it once before, is a form that collects the demographic and financial information about the student and the family. All this information can be submitted electronically, and then that information is provided to the college and will be used to determine the EFC, or the estimated family contribution, that is needed in order to determine a student's federal financial aid eligibility. The EFC is the amount of money that is expected by the student and his or her family to reasonably contribute to the cost of the student's education for an academic year. There's a formula that the Department of Ed uses in order to determine, based on the income information that is provided, what a student's EFC is. In order to submit a FAFSA, the easiest way is to submit it online at www.fafsa.gov. The FAFSA for the 2015-16 academic year is now available, and Fort Hays has a priority deadline of March 1st, 2015. We really encourage students to make sure to have their FAFSA submitted by that date. It gives them the best chance of being awarded some of our limited funded money, which includes the Federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant, the Perkins Loan, as well as work study. The website that I listed there, the FAFSA.gov, is where you should go. Please make sure when you are submitting the FAFSA that you are using that website. There are some companies out there who will charge you to submit the FAFSA. They will basically charge you a fee. They will take your information and they will go on and submit a free application for federal student aid on your behalf. So make sure that you type in FAFSA.gov and use that as the place to submit your FAFSA. A couple things that I wanted to highlight about submitting the FAFSA that might be helpful to you. One is the use of the IRS data retrieval tool. And when you're submitting the FAFSA, and the FOTW there is FAFSA on the web, you can basically request real-time information from the IRS to basically transfer your tax data back into the FAFSA. So it will get to the point where it's asking you for your income, and if you are eligible, it will allow you to transfer over to the IRS website and take a look at your tax information and then transfer that back into your FAFSA. This is very helpful in terms of getting correct income and tax information into the FAFSA, and it can reduce the documents that the financial aid office might need from your student in the future. Now, you will have to have filed your taxes, and they will have to have been processed before you would be able to use the IRS data retrieval tool. So that does require you to file your taxes fairly early and fairly quickly after you are able to do so. So if you are not able to file your taxes and use the IRS data retrieval tool before the March 1st FAFSA priority deadline at Fort Hays, you can go and use estimates in the FAFSA, submit your estimated tax information, and then once you do have your taxes completed, you can log back into the FAFSA and make a correction, and then go and use the IRS data retrieval tool, then resubmit your FAFSA to us. So that can help as well, like I said, with reducing the documentation that we might need. You can always go back in and use it at a later time to retrieve your tax information. This is a screenshot, and I apologize, it's probably pretty small print there for you, but a couple things there that I wanted to point out is that it will allow you, once you have submitted the FAFSA and submitted your confirmation, that if you do have another child who needs to complete a FAFSA, you can click on the link to allow you to transfer your parent information into a new FAFSA for your other child. The other link there that it will give you will be to start your state application. So for instance, for whatever state you reside in, if they have state-based financial aid, it will link you up based on your residency to that state application for you to complete that as well. Some frequent FAFSA errors, you see a number of them listed there. A lot of it depends upon just making sure that you enter correct information with regarding to tax and that sort of thing. Also entering your correct Social Security number. Sometimes there's questions with regard to parents who are divorced or who are remarried and what information needs to be submitted. There's some really good help functions on the FAFSA on the web with additional instructions, and I encourage you to use those. Click on those links in those boxes to get some clarification on what information does need to be included in the answer to those questions. I do have a question, it looks like here, kind of backing up to the last slide. Does Kansas have state-based aid? Yes, they do, through the Kansas Board of Regents. You can even do a search for Kansas Board of Regents state aid or scholarships and that sort of thing, and it may direct you right there. So I would encourage you to take a look at that, and that is the Kansas Board of Regents. Typically, once a student submits their FAFSA, those results then are sent to the school that they have listed on their FAFSA. They can obviously select Fort Hays, and that's what they would want to do in this case. Our school code, if they need it, is 001915. However, the FAFSA will let you search for schools as well, so they don't have to have that number when they're on their filling in the FAFSA information. They'll be able to look it up and find it. And that information then is sent to that school. However, usually most schools don't start processing aid for the next year until late March or April. So if your student submits their FAFSA today, most likely we will start getting that information until late March or April. And at that time, we will then start communicating with your student about whether we need any additional documentation or what their next steps are. And we use the email address that the student provides on the FAFSA. So it's very important that they put an email address on the FAFSA that they check regularly, and one that they won't terminate, or an email address that they don't intend to continue using. We will let them know once we have the FAFSA, and then anytime we need additional documentation. We communicate with students through email and through their Tiger Tracks account. So we encourage them to check that regularly, both their email and their Tiger Tracks account, to see if we need additional documentation from them in order to continue processing their federal aid. As I indicated earlier, if you use estimated tax information so that you can get your FAFSA submitted by our March 1st priority deadline, you can go back in, and we would strongly encourage you to go back in and update it when you have your actual tax information, and then resubmit that information to our office. Resubmit the FAFSA so that information does get to our office. Documentation can be submitted directly to our office, and we take documentation in a variety of different methods. It can be scanned and submitted in an email to us. It can be faxed to our office. They can walk it into the office, whatever is easiest for the students to submit that documentation to us. I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar that occasionally there are times where there are special circumstances that a family may have that can't be easily documented or answered on the FAFSA in their standard questions. And there's a process called special circumstances that allow financial aid administrators to consider those circumstances and make any adjustments to a student's FAFSA information that are warranted. To do that, we have a form on our website called a professional judgment form, and there is a link there that tells students all the information that we need, what sort of documentation we need. We do require that they provide us a written explanation of what the situation is, and then what sort of additional documentation that we need. Then we will review that. We will request any additional information if we need it. And then to kind of give you an idea of what sort of situations this might cover, it could be that there's a change in the employment status of the parent. So perhaps they were working in 2014, but they ended up losing their job in 2015, so that their financial situation in 2015 is going to look different than it looked in 2014, which is the information and the tax information that they would have provided on the FAFSA. So there is a mechanism that we can take a look at that and see if we need to make any adjustments to an adjusted gross income and that sort of thing. Occasionally we have students or parents who have medical expenses that aren't covered by insurance. Maybe there's a change in the marital status of the parents. Maybe there are different dependent care expenses, or maybe a student can't obtain their parental information. So there are a number of different situations, and on the professional judgment form that we have on our website, we do highlight some of those that may be common examples or common circumstances that we consider, but there's also an other category. So if it doesn't fit into one of those categories, the student can submit that to us in a written explanation, and we can figure out if there are any adjustments that can then be made. So where to go from here is to meet the priority FAFSA application deadline for our office, which is March the 1st. Submit any requested documents. The sooner that we get all the documents that we need, the sooner we can get their financial aid processed, get an award letter to them so that we can actually award their aid and start processing it. We also encourage students to look at any other sources of aid that are out there. A lot of times there are scholarships that are offered through community organizations, maybe a parent's employer, a number of different places that students can look for other sources of aid. We do also have on our website a scholarships page, which does have a link to some outside scholarship search engines that students might want to look at as well, and see if there's anything else out there that they might be eligible for. Okay, well that rolls through the prepared presentation that I have that covers most of the general information about financial aid, but I'd be happy to take any questions if you have them, so you are welcome to type your questions in the chat box. Our office is open Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Central Time. You can contact our office by phone, and that number is 785-628-4408, or you can email us to our website, to our email address, which is finaid, F-I-N-A-I-D, @fhsu.edu. And then our website is www.fhsu.edu/finaid, F-I-N-A-I-D. You can also just go to the main Fort Hays page and search for financial aid and find us there. So I'm happy to stick around and answer any questions that you might have if you want to type those in. If you don't have any questions and want to log off, you're welcome to do that. I appreciate you attending. Please call our office if there's anything that we can help you with in the future. Okay, I don't see any questions then at this time, so please give our office a call if there's anything we can help you with. Thank you.